Just a short trip this weekend. Arsenal are in Stratford at the London Stadium where they face Julen Lopetegui's West Ham United. The Arsenal are back, we say. Well, Saturday evening is the time to show it. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. How are we? Welcome back to the pod. Hope you've all had a good week so far. Hope you're looking forward to the game on Saturday as much as I am. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. This weekend presents a massive opportunity and one that we simply have to take. If we win at West Ham on Saturday evening, we're in a win-win situation going into Sunday. Liverpool take on Manchester City, meaning either one of them or both of them drop points. And when you're as far behind Liverpool as we are, weekends like this become vital. And with a team like City, who seem to be able to come back from the dead, you've got to seize every opportunity to hurt them. I want to begin by reacting to some of Mikel Arteta's press conference on this pod, and we'll revisit the kind of significance of our game along with Sunday's game in the title race a little bit later on in the pod. I do want to say a few hellos, though, because there's plenty of you with us live right now, which is great to see. Thank you all so much for being with us. Your support means the world. But a good place to start, I think, in our preview and in our build-up to this game is Mikel Arteta's press conference. He faced the media today at London Colney ahead of Saturday's game. And obviously, the first question that was put to him was with regards to team news, injury news specifically. Mikel Arteta said that there was no update on Gabriel. He, of course, came off injured against Sporting. And Mikel Arteta said it's not because he doesn't want to give us an update. It's because he can't. Obviously, there's another training session to come. And that's the problem with these press conferences, right? Mikel Arteta's able to kind of hide behind the fact that there's often another training session between the press conference and the game. And that kind of gives him a bit of a get out of jail free card and a route to kind of dodge the questions that come at him with regards to injuries. We know that he doesn't like to give much away, even if he knew what the situation was with Gabriel, which I'm sure he does. He's not going to come out and tell us. He's not going to come out and give anything away. He wants to keep the opposition management guessing as much as he possibly can. And even Alexander Zinchenko's gone on record recently, hasn't he, as saying that Mikel Arteta, for instance, asks injured players to turn up in the changing room with their changing bags and everything to kind of give that impression and to try and throw off the opposition manager. So, look, He never said that Gabriel was unavailable, which I think you kind of have to take as good news. I think that if Gabriel was ruled out, he probably would have told us. Although having said that, he might look at West Ham and what they have in their ranks, the likes of Mikel Antonio, very physical centre-half, who would probably quite enjoy playing against someone like Jakub Kiwior, for instance, over Gabriel. Maybe if Gabriel is out, that's not the message that you want to give to a team that have that kind of physical prowess themselves and that will be looking to exploit that. So the more I think about it, the more I think, no, actually, even if Gabriel was out, he probably wouldn't have told us. I was trying to say that the fact that he, didn't rule him out was a positive, but even if he was out, maybe he doesn't want to give that information over to West Ham and allow them to kind of prepare a game plan and prepare for maybe targeting, for instance, if it's Jakub Kiwior playing at left centre-back in his place. What else did he have to say in today's press conference? He talked about Jurrien Timber. He was full of praise for the Dutchman, said he's still got a couple of levels to go in terms of getting to his best, but he's been really impressed by the leadership that he's shown on the pitch. Obviously, very experienced player, Jurrien Timber, from his time at Ajax. And obviously, he's come into the Arsenal side and I think he's done really, really well. He was very unfortunate with the injury he suffered at the start of his Gunners career. He seems to be over that now. There's been a few niggles this season, and I think that's to be expected when someone's been out as long as Jurrien Timber was. I think you're going to get that. I think you're going to struggle to get yourself back up to tip-top condition without having a few little muscular setbacks along the way. You're pushing your body for the first time in a long time. You're pushing those boundaries, you're pushing those limits, and it's natural, I think, that you end up, having a couple of those setbacks. So, yeah, let's see how he gets on for the rest of the season. But we had an interesting debate on yesterday's podcast with regards to Timber. Is he an upgrade on Ben White in that right back position? Let me know your thoughts. It certainly feels like it's a position that comes quite naturally to Jurrien Timber. And I have to say, given his history and the fact that he was a centre-back pretty much all his career prior to joining Arsenal, I wasn't sure how he'd fare at fullback, but he looks at home at right back. I think he looks at home defensively when he plays at left back, but I think you take away a big part of his game when you play him on that side, because going forward, he's nowhere near as influential. Mikel Arteta also spoke about Martin Odegaard. He waxed lyrical about his captain, talked about his consistency, his performance levels, the leadership, everything that he brings to the table, and obviously made the point that he's been missed when he's been absent. And I think we can all understand why that is. The level of performance has increased significantly since he returned. He started his first game back against Chelsea, where I thought we were quite good for large periods of that game, especially in the second half. We then go out and brush aside a really good, strong, well-drilled, well-organised Nottingham Forest side with ease. And then, of course, we went to Lisbon in midweek and we blew Sporting away with a fantastic performance. It really, really was. And again, Martin Odegaard was at the centre of that. There was a question posed to him about Thomas Partey's contract situation. Of course, the Ghanaian is out of contract at the end of the season. A lot of us suspected that he might have been sold this summer. We're still a year to run on his contract. But as the window went on and it became apparent that there wasn't the kind of interest that maybe some people were expecting, I know I felt that actually if you were then going to sell him on the cheap for sort of 10, 15 million pounds, I thought about what it would cost to replace him. And I thought, no, you know what? Keep him, because you keep him and you know what he's about. And if you can keep him fit and available, you know he's a really big asset. And he's one of the best midfielders in the league. The problem has always been availability for Thomas Partey. And Mikel Arteta referenced his availability in this press conference. He talked about the fact that he's in a really good physical condition, which is allowing him, as he put it, to be his best self. He was also asked about Raheem Sterling in today's presser, and he said the plan is to use Sterling more than he has so far. He takes responsibility, the boss does, for his lack of minutes, speaking highly of the player's application and attitude. I know that I said on this pod a few weeks ago that when you're chasing goals and you're bringing on left backs before you're bringing on Raheem Sterling, maybe it's because there's something more to it. Perhaps it's because the attitude's not quite been there, the application hasn't really been there. I did wonder if there was maybe more to that. But then I thought back to sort of what I was saying at the time that we signed him. And although, you know, I thought it was a good signing because it was essentially free and because, you know, we weren't paying even all of his wages, not even a significant portion really in comparison to what you'd expect. Chelsea are pretty much funding us having Raheem Sterling, which is quite astonishing when you think about it. But one of the things I said at the time when people questioned Raheem Sterling's attitude and application levels and questioned as to whether that might be why Enzo Maresca didn't want him at Stamford Bridge, I thought about it then, and I remember saying on various podcasts, well, Mikel Arteta knows this guy inside out. They worked super closely together during their time at Manchester City. And if Arteta thought that Raheem Sterling was the type of character that would come in and unsettle, that would come in and cause problems, I don't think he would have signed him. He obviously knows the guy really, really well. He obviously believes that he can be an asset to this squad in some way. And we haven't quite seen it just yet. But hopefully between now and the end of the season, we do. And if he makes one really vital, telling contribution between now and the end of the campaign that either sees us win a trophy or drags us back into the race, then the signing will be seen as a success because it hasn't cost us. So, you know, it's about risk versus reward. The reward could potentially be massive from the Raheem Sterling signing. The risk is very little because we haven't paid anything. You know, we've paid a bit towards his wages, but when you think about how much of it, you know, Chelsea are sort of subsidizing, it was and is a no-brainer. And hopefully between now and the end of the season, because if we're being completely honest, he hasn't had the impact that I would have hoped. Hopefully we can see an increase in the way he impacts games and in his ability to do that. Because we know he's got it in the locker. We've seen it for years and years in the Premier League. Just a quick plug for our Patreon page. Make sure you check it out, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to bring you more content, then you can support us for just £3 per month. In return, you'll have access to that additional content. You'll be part of the community. You'll have a direct line into me. You'll be able to message me, get involved in our chats over there as well. And yeah, there's lots of benefits to being a patron. But for me, it's it's something that for those that have signed up, I'm super appreciative of, not because, it makes us loads of money, but because it just gives me that little bit of breathing space where I can then pump money back into the pod, essentially, bringing people on, the hosting costs and all the rest of it. It just helps me. And as a freelancer, it allows me to spend more time on essentially what is my passion project. There's 2 new episodes on there right now. So if you were on the fence about signing up, now's probably a good time to check it out. There's a episode which is centered around my journey into commentary. And it's something I get asked about loads and loads in the replies to so many of my social media posts that I thought I'd record an episode on it. So check it out. And also, there's a continuation of yesterday's main pod with myself and Mike Stavrou. And on this Patreon piece, we talk about Mikel Arteta's midfield, the options that he has in there, and more. So do check it out if you haven't done so already. It's patreon.com/the Chronicles of Laguna. The link is in the description. Check it out. Okay, lots of comments coming through. I will pick up on your comments in just a few moments. So keep them coming. Keep your questions coming as well. But focusing back on this game against West Ham at the weekend, specifically for a minute, it's interesting, isn't it? Because London derbies, they seem to be able to carry a certain atmosphere in that a rivalry can become a lot fiercer because of that kind of London rivalry and the proximity between the two clubs. I've never particularly felt a massive rivalry with West Ham because I think their hatred for Tottenham and their hatred for Chelsea means that by default, because of our relationship with those two football clubs, is, our relationship by default is kind of watered down a little bit. I don't really feel that rivalry with West Ham. I've got to be honest with you. I say that London derbies can carry a certain atmosphere because we've seen it in the past, right? We've experienced it in the past. We've been to places like West Ham and been up against it and had to deal with a really difficult atmosphere. We've been to places like Brentford when they first came into the Premier League and we had to deal with a really, really difficult atmosphere. But the London Stadium specifically is very much a place where I think you can experience both ends of the spectrum. It's super dependent on how West Ham play. And I say this ahead of plenty of away trips, but if you go there and you impose yourselves early, you can flatten the atmosphere. And with the way things have gone so far this season, generally for the Irons, I don't suspect it will take that much to create a frustration within the stands that will surely spill onto the pitch in some capacity. Add to that we won 6-0 there last season in the league. And that will play on the minds of some of those players that were involved, some of the fans' minds. There's no question about that. We've got a healthy record at the London Stadium of late. We've won 3 of the last 5 Premier League meetings between the two clubs. But in terms of recent form, generally across the Premier League, they're actually in better form than us. They've won 2 of their last 5, whereas we've managed just 1 victory in our last 5. But generally, it's fair to say West Ham has struggled this season. 14th for a team that many claimed had won the transfer window is underwhelming, but it's got to click at some point, right? And that's kind of my fear and anxiety going into this game. We go there confident, and so we should, but it's the Premier League, and you can never afford to allow kind of complacency to creep in. They obviously beat Newcastle earlier in the week up at St. James's Park on Monday night, 2-0 win. And that will have done them the world of good because there were questions starting to be asked of Julen Lopetegui. I wouldn't say he's quite out of the woods in terms of sort of people being convinced by his credentials. But it certainly goes some way in softening a lot of people's positions on him. And to follow that up with a victory over Arsenal at the London Stadium in front of their crowd, under the lights, etc., televised game, that could really kind of kickstart the Lopetegui era at West Ham. So we got to be wary. We got to be careful. I say this a lot, but I genuinely do feel like that going into a lot of Premier League games. Like there's 3, 4, 5 games that I look at on paper and I just go, yep, we win those comfortably. No debate, no argument. But there's a few that I look at like this where I don't quite put them in the sort of top tier of games in terms of their difficulty, but I put them in that tier where if you're not good, if you don't turn up, if you're below the level that you should be, you could get turned over. And I look at that West Ham team. I looked at their team earlier today that started the game against Newcastle. And I thought it was a really well-rounded team. And that's what makes their current league position so baffling and so confusing. You know, if you want to talk about physical stuff and the physical side of the game, they've got players that can do that. They've got Kilman at the back. They've got Thomas Souček in there, who, you know, has proven himself to be exactly that over the years. They will probably stick Mikel Antonio up front, who, you know, can give your centre halves a good run around and a good bash in here and there. In terms of technical ability, well, they've got that as well. You know, there's a lot of good players in that side. Lucas Paqueta being the standout man, a player that in the past was heavily linked with us. If you ask me about pace, you know, Jarrod Bowen's pretty sharp down the right-hand side. Crescencio Somerville, one of their summer signings down the left-hand side, can be a real nuisance as well. As I say, on paper, I think they're a really well-rounded side. And that's why I'm in that kind of headspace of, yeah, we should win this. And I expect us to go there and win this. But at the same time, I'm well aware of the fact that if Arsenal don't turn up and play at something close to their best, this could be a really, really tricky evening. I hate 5:30 kickoffs. I hate them when they're away from home. And yeah, that kind of adds to my worry and concern going into this game. In terms of the starting 11 that I would pick to face West Ham United, and of course, it's dependent on whether Gabriel is fit or not, but it doesn't take a genius to work out that if he is fit, he'd be in my starting 11. My team looks like this. Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Calafiori would be my back four, assuming Gabriel makes it. If he doesn't, I think you've got to bring Jakub Kiwior into the side. I heard somebody earlier today suggest that maybe we bring Zinchenko in at left back and push Calafiori into left centre back. I know a lot of Arsenal fans are quite keen actually to see him play in that position. I just think as little disruption as possible is what we need here. And, you know, if Kiwior does play, I worry that West Ham will do exactly what I suggested earlier on in the podcast, which is stick Mikel Antonio on him, try and bully him a little bit, try and win that physical battle and hope that he can get players in and around him to play off of him and cause Arsenal some problems. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we do in defense if Gabriel is unavailable, but I'm quite hopeful that he'll play. Moving into the midfield, I pick our best midfield: Partey, Rice, and Odegaard. Good to see Rice play in midweek and get the minutes that he needs. It was good that we were able to give him the time off against Nottingham Forest. We didn't have to call upon him, which was, you know, really, I think, significant given that we know he'd been struggling, and to be able to give him that weekend off and just allow him that extra few days to recover and be prepared and ready for Sporting. And then he could come back and be at a much higher level, much more like himself. And that would see him maybe kickstart his season, because as we discussed on yesterday's pod, which you can check out, I think it's fair to say that Declan's been a bit below it in comparison to where he was last season. Comments in the chat about the darkness in the room that I'm in. I apologize, guys. As I've been explaining to you guys for a little while, if you're watching on the video, I recently moved house a couple of weeks ago now, and we're still living in chaos. I haven't got a man cave at this place. It's something that I need to build, which I'm unfortunately having to save up for a little bit, because the quotes are coming in a lot higher than I expected. I took it for granted, my old man cave. It was beautiful, but it means I'm podcasting from bedrooms. I haven't got the proper lights. After looking at this today, I think I'm going to have to bring one of the lights in here out of the box and get it in use. But yeah, if you just bear with me for the next few weeks or so, because it's been quite challenging actually to move a family into a new home and get everything unpacked and all the rest of it, but B, make sure that all my work stuff is set up and ready to go. And when you're still decorating the place and having to move stuff from one room to another every 5 minutes, you want to kind of take out as least things as possible. So yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare, but we'll get there eventually, I promise. It's what I say that's important anyway. It's not what I look like. You know what I look like. So yeah, Calafiori, Gabriel, Saliba, and Timber will be my back four, assuming Gabriel makes it. If he doesn't, Kiwior comes in. Partey, Rice, and Odegaard will be my midfield. And then my front three: Saka, Martinelli, and Havertz. That's what I'd go with. I like Martinelli in the away games. I think he gives us something a little bit different. Good to see Trossard come on the other night and score, because I think he needed it. But Martinelli scored too, and I would just say that Martinelli edges it for me in terms of the team selection. Look, obviously, given that we're 9 points behind Liverpool at this stage of the season, points are super important. A Man City result on Sunday would be great. And yeah, of course, we're looking at that game with great interest, and we're hoping that things go in a favorable way for us. We need to focus on ourselves at this moment in time, though. Like, we need to get the victory. And I know people would argue that we need to get the victory at all costs. And absolutely, the 3 points is paramount, and that's the most important thing. But I think it's really important that we manage to get that victory while continuing to perform at a really high level. This run that we need to go on now isn't something that you can manage at 65, 70% in terms of performance levels. Yeah, we need the points. I keep saying that. But I personally need performances right now. Belief comes from performances as well as results. And for me to sit here and say that Arsenal are back in the title race, which is what some people have been saying over the last few days, I need the level of performance to stay high. And I need to be coming away from Saturday's game thinking, yeah, you know what, we really are back. And it wasn't just a flash in the pan. It wasn't just a reaction to Odegaard returning. It's something that I believe that we can sustain. And the more games you go out there and perform to that level consecutively, the more that belief grows. And that fear and anxiety that you breathe into your opponents, that people feel ahead of a game against you, you can restore that aura. You can restore it by being impressive, dominant, controlling, and above all, convincing. So, yes, we've got to win first and foremost. And I'll share with you my prediction in just a second. But I really, really do believe that the importance is of paramount importance at the minute as well, because that's the only way we're going to build the confidence levels back up to where they belong. It's the only way people are going to start to fear us again in the way that they have done over the last couple of seasons, which has influenced the way they've played against us, which has meant that we've been able to go into games dominating them from the very beginning. We haven't had to weather the storms that we had to in previous years, because people, when they rate you, come into those games a lot more cautiously. So, yeah, performance is massive as well. Result, first and foremost, but performance is huge too. It really, really is. In terms of my prediction, I'm going to go with West Ham United 0, Arsenal 2. I'm really looking forward to covering this one. I'll be on commentary duty alongside former Gunner, Arsenal legend, I should say, Nigel Winterburn will be covering the game for Arsenal TV. So when you watch the highlights back via the Arsenal platforms after the game, or if you watch the game back in full, the next day when it becomes available on the Arsenal player, it will be myself and Nigel Winterburn on commentary. So really, really looking forward to bringing you guys that one. Just a quick request before I dive into some of your questions. Please do leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel as well. If you're brand new, I really, really appreciate that. If you're listening to us on the audio platforms, please do leave us a review as well. That really, really does help. But yeah, time to dive into the live chat. Let's see what you guys are saying, apart from commenting about the light. Someone said that I'm trying to, where is it? Steve Stone said it's Friday evening. Harry is using seductive lighting to try and entice Mrs. H. Oh man, if only I was that romantic, eh? What else have we got in the live chat? Let's take a couple more of your points. Max says Liverpool got lucky in a few games. They might go through a slump too. City, as we've seen, are not unbeatable now. As long as we keep a good winning run of form, we'll be back in the race. And I subscribe to that idea. I really, really do. Like, I think we've got a lot to do. And I've said it many times over the last few weeks, and I'll say it again for clarity. As of today, I don't think we're in the title race. When you're 9 points off at this stage in the season, I don't think you should be thinking of yourselves as being in the title race and obsessing over every little detail. What you've got to do is put a run together. You need to focus on putting that run together. And I guarantee you that if you put that run together and you make it last until January, the end of January, if we can go on a really good, significant run between now and then, I guarantee you that we'd have closed the gap on Liverpool by some margin. Now, I'm not saying we're going to make up the whole 9 points, because they look really good at the minute and they don't look like they're going to drop many. But I do think we could close it to potentially 5. And if you close it to 5 going into the new year, well, then things start to look very, very different, don't they? So I think, yes, We'll be watching their game on Sunday with interest. Yes, I'd prefer Manchester City to beat them, etc., etc. But I think for me, it's about us making sure that we continue our improvement in form, that we continue on the right path. And if we do that and subsequently string that run together, then we will be back in it. I'm certain of that. AFC Leo says Arteta just can't keep a winning streak. To win a title, you pretty much have to go a whole season unbeaten. City won their titles because they barely lost before this season, and their last loss was last year. I don't think you have to go a season unbeaten. If that was the case, nobody would have been champions since Arsenal went unbeaten in 2003, 2004, because nobody's gone unbeaten. I don't think that's true necessarily, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to go in on Mikel Arteta at this stage of the season. Has he made a few mistakes? I think he has. Has he done things differently to the way I would have done them? Yeah, sure. But ultimately, you've seen the difference that having his best players back has made. And that, if anything, should shine a light on the fact that actually, some players are just irreplaceable. And I say this about Man City as well. And Man City fans will tell you the same thing. You can have all the cover in the world. You can have all the depth in the world, but you lose Rodri, you're weaker. Why? Because he's that damn good. He's a Ballon d'Or winner. The very best players in world football, they're irreplaceable. That's why they're the best players. It don't matter how many millions you spend trying to build a squad or trying to raise the floor, as we've been saying over the last year or so, with regards to the way that Arsenal have done business. Some players are just too good to replace. That's the bottom line. It's as simple as that. I really do believe that. Anuj says, what would be your preferred result for the Liverpool versus City game? I'd prefer City 1, to be honest with you, because not only would it dent Liverpool, who are obviously further ahead of us. This is going to sound weird. I kind of want City to wake up a little bit. Like, I don't want them to be flawless and perfect, but I want them to wake up a little bit, because I think the pressure of Liverpool being chased by two sides is more likely to get to them. So I think a 3-horse race for us right now is a healthier position to be in, because the 3-horse race, it adds to Liverpool's pressure. All of a sudden, every weekend, they're not looking over their shoulder to see what one team did. They're looking over their shoulder to see what two have done. And I think that we need City to be in the race, at least for now. Also, for Liverpool, they'll be rocked. There's a bit of pressure on Liverpool going into this. It's the first time in something like 287 games, I read earlier on today, that Manchester City aren't the favourites going into a Premier League game. So if Liverpool at Anfield, where they really fancy themselves, and rightly so, get turned over by this out of form, out of sorts Manchester City side, that could mentally have an impact on them. So yeah, we'll see. Anu says, I don't want City to wake up. I don't want them to wake up like to the levels that they've been at in previous years, but I do want them to be in the race at this stage, because I think it's really, really important that it's a 3-horse race rather than a 2, because that adds to the pressure on Arne Slot's side. And Arne Slot's not been here before. He's not done this before. He's not been in a Premier League title race, which is a completely different kettle of fish to anything, however much you want to dress it up, he would have experienced in the Netherlands. Did I give you my prediction? If I didn't, I'll give it to you now. West Ham United 0, Arsenal 2. I can't even remember what I said 5 minutes ago because I'm that shattered. It's been one of those days. But yeah, West Ham 0, Arsenal 2 is my prediction. Hopefully it comes off. Hopefully it comes right. I'm backing us for the clean sheet, and I'm backing us to score a couple of goals on away turf. Okay, going to leave it there. Thank you all so much, as always, for joining me on another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. West Ham versus Arsenal coming up this weekend, Saturday, 5:30. Big old game. Let's do our job. Let's do our bit, and then we can sit with our feet up on Sunday. Watch Liverpool versus Manchester City, and whatever will be, will be. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.